Yeah, for the final part, we're just going to do a panel now. So I'll kick off with some questions. It's a key theme for today's M&A, or M&I, as I've just heard as well, and PE as well. So I'll kick off with a few questions and then hand it over to you guys to ask some more. But just to kick off, we'll do some intros. Obviously, Mark and Andy have already kicked off, so perhaps Liz, you could do a quick intro.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. Liz Harrison-Flynn. Background 25 years in technology, predominantly in telecommunications and more recently in financial services. Worked at Legal & General for 10 years and set up their digital capability, both in-house, nearshore, offshore, engineering, and anybody that's interested, I could bore you with that one. And then last year did an interim CIO role at the Phoenix Group that you probably know better as Standard Life up in Edinburgh, which was fantastic. Unfortunately, they'd appointed a permanent person by the time I arrived, so that wasn't an option. But that's a bit about me.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Stephen Russell. I'm the Solutions Director within the build function at Crosslake, which means nothing to most of you, so I'll try and explain what that means. Crosslake is an organisation that has two sides to it. One is due diligence, specifically for private equity in sort of the mid-market space. So when deals are happening, we've already heard from Mark and Andy, that due diligence process. Some smaller businesses, some businesses will do it themselves. Sometimes you'll use one-man bands. Crosslake and actually what was in Technica, which is the company I joined and was acquired by Crosslake last year, has kind of more formal processes, if you like, that take the learnings of hundreds of these exercises that they do every year. That's one side of the business. The other side of the business is value creation. So we provide software development expertise kind of across the full SDLC stack, really, to clients where maybe diligence has spotted a couple of things that need a bit of a SWAT team to just go in and out, get it done. Or maybe we might see, we do complete rebuilds of kind of entire estates, whether that's because technology's moved on and we need to do something else, or technical debt has they've decided to just write it off and start again. So that's me.
Okay, brilliant. So just to kick off, my first question, what are the top 3 priorities you focus on when integrating businesses post-deal? Would like to kick us off?
Okay. So when integrating businesses post-deal, so I talked about this earlier on, but the most important thing is understanding the value of the business that we're acquiring. And then I guess cybersecurity is absolutely critical. And then agreeing a long-term plan to that value, and it might be multiple steps. So yeah, I think there's more than 3. So yeah, I think it will depend on the deal, on the value of that deal. Will depend our focus. But yeah, I would say the cybersecurity, the value it brings, and agreeing a plan with all parties.
Just to build on that, I think my experience was quite significant on the M&A piece at Phoenix Group, because that's what they do. And one of the observations that was really important was getting real clarity from the board around what their business plan was for this acquisition. Because I think my sense was not being clear about that meant I was swimming in the dark in terms of what our priorities needed to be. So getting that real clarity from the board about they bought this organisation, what do they want to do with it? I think the other piece, and it's almost would have happened before the acquisition, is the TSA agreement, the transition plan for technology. And both of you mentioned around being at the table ahead of the deal. And the quality of that is vital. So it's not 3, but it's 2 of the big ones that would be really important to me.
One thing, and I had maybe talking about this a moment ago, I think, is the people aspects of it as well. Of should have an idea what you're doing with the people beforehand.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether it's staying or going, all needs to be quite respectful. But part of the cyber aspect of securing the business is making sure the right people are involved and got an arm around them etc. So I think getting in there and making sure that the people who are going to be involved are aware of how they're operating now and who they're operating with and connected to people and not felt left alone.
I'm not sure I can add much to that, but I think the thing that was going through my head as all those were coming out is getting people into a conversation that a lot of this is based on assumption and being clear about what those assumptions are really, really early, because I think that can shift the tone and the emphasis in the way that some of these things tease out as you learn more through the process. So probably that's the thing I would hang together across all of that.
I mean, I think you alluded to it earlier actually, but what is the best and worst things about working? Actually, perhaps take this back to private equity. For those who've worked in private equity, what's the best and worst things about working within a PE-backed organisation?
Best and worst simultaneously is the pace, I think. If the plan is there and you're building on a stable platform, you can move incredibly quickly. And if you're not building on that stable platform, you still need to move incredibly quickly. So it's great if the investment makes sense, or if you can frame it in a way that it is an investment that leads to EBITDA growth and therefore valuation growth. You can get on with it. But the challenge with that is not only do you have to get it done, but if you're not already starting from a good place, it's really hard.
Does that change in, obviously, depending on the length of the cycle? I often hear about that the final couple of years can be quite challenging in a different way. Is that?
So, it's investments towards the end of the cycle have got to deliver in the cycle. They're not paying for someone else to benefit. So you've got to frame it right that's why it's got to deliver in 3, 6, 9 months or however long you've got left, rather than in 3 years' time. This will be great for the new owner.
And just to add to that, I'm always thinking about the impact on people and the talent conversations. And I think, some people flourish in a varying environment, but not everyone does. And a business often needs people that need consistency. So when you're working in a PE-backed organisation that's going through multiple sales cycles, let's say over 8 years, you might go through 2 or 3 of those. It can be quite challenging to work in an environment where it's spend, stop, spend. So I think, yes, some people can thrive and can cope with that, but actually not everyone can. So again, that's just a consideration when thinking of the people aspect.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you find many people leave during that 2-year period because they just want that, they thrive on that constant change you spoke about and pace? And
so generally, no, they're just extremely stressed inside, and their stress cycle probably follows will change as the cycle goes. But yeah, I think it's the management style needs to change to adapt to the changing demands on those people, I would say.
Any views around that at all?
Not sure I had anything.
No.
Okay. Which technology, in your experience, plays the most crucial role in a successful M&A?
I'm allowed to reveal that we sort of may have seen some of it. I thought when I saw this exactly the same thing that you said earlier, that it's so, I don't know how you would isolate one thing and say that's the thing that's most responsible, because it's all about the combination of choices and how that combination of choices come together. So that's me backing out of an answer.
Fair enough.
So a facetious answer would be whatever your comms tools are, because communication is critical, both in terms of making the plan but broadcasting it and repeating it. That's definitely quite facetious. I don't have a good answer.
I think there is an answer to that. I think day one, the first thing that we would always do is cybersecurity tools. And it's not just to fend off an external threat, it's to control your data. We talked about the competitive environment and the example of the seller with seller's regret. We've talked about that a little, and actually controlling the data, which is now your data on day one, and you can do that in a way that isn't conflict driven by just securing tools on assets that are not globally managed. So I would say the cybersecurity tools is always the very first thing that you would do day one.
I would say agree with all of that. There is no single one, but the one probably I've grappled with the most over all the experience of M&A has been data, and where data resides and whether we can integrate, what platform are we putting it onto. Meanwhile, the business is going. So when somebody phones up they can't see your data. And, you know, and so I did the T-Mobile Orange merger years ago, and that was the biggest problem. Customers just expected us to be able to see all the accounts in front of all the customer services teams, and it took us 2 years to do that because we hadn't thought, well, somebody hadn't thought that through, I say we. And that was a repeated challenge. You know, one of the big programs in Standard Life was consolidating something like 40 million records, and nothing else could happen from that program until we'd fixed that problem. So I would probably say, if you want one, it's data for me.
So I'm just going to open up to the floor if anyone else has any questions on the subject of M&A or PE at all. Somewhat.
If I'm a senior IT person in a business, I'm about to be acquired by another business, I'm a spare, what's the best way for me to get the best outcome from me?
Good question. So I think, firstly, I would recommend some sort of sell-side diligence is done prior to going into the process. So I might not necessarily be answering your question, but hopefully there'll be an answer in there. So when we sit down with PE houses or their CTOs, and we're talking about this cycle in general, these guys can talk to this better than I can from sort of the pre-deal perspective. Doing some sort of sell-side diligence where a team will come in and give you an objective view of what would this look like in a diligence process, and what are the things that you can fix now before you go to market, or how do you craft a story around some of the things that are there. There's a lot of misconceptions around diligence and kind of what to expect. So picking up the phone to people who've done it before, and speaking to people on the other side of the process would probably be the first thing to do. Actually going through a sell-side process will be really enlightening. As I say, it might not tell you anything you already know, but it might help you craft a story ready for the process you're going to go through. But yeah, not to be afraid of it, I think, would be the main thing. Really engage in the process, and you know, it's about the truth. The truth will set you free, as I always say to clients when we speak to them. Yeah, just embracing it and seeing it as a positive exercise in how you can move forward.
I'll just add to that a little. I think what we often see people in that position where they're in a senior IT role and they're on that side of the coin, they'll try to make themselves indispensable, sometimes by leveraging their knowledge or not sharing knowledge, and that's because they think that might protect them. I think what I've seen is that can sometimes do the exact opposite, in that they find themselves on the risk side of the report and not the opportunity side of the report. So my advice would be exactly what you said, engage in the process, show your value in other ways, not just in the knowledge that you have, but in the skills that you can bring. So that would be my advice, yeah.
An observation of a real experience I saw last year was as a result of a particular merger, there was an exit of 400 people out of the organisation because the view was the business could outsource this to a third-party service. And as a result, this company lost all its subject matter expertise. So suddenly some of the people that were joining the organisation, opportunities came along. So you never know. And I would definitely advocate the approach of just get involved, understand who it is you're going to be working with, understand what the opportunities might be, because you might be pleasantly surprised, actually. Because a lot of people just leave because they don't want to work for the new entity, which creates other opportunities as well. So good luck with that.
Mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to stay, or do you want to get paid off?
You've probably got both options.
I
suspect you've got both options.
What's the best way to get good payoff?
Yeah, I think either way,
Be indispensable.
it's engage and build relationships with the people who are probably defining who's helpful or who has been helpful. I definitely think it's that sort of knowledge is power kind of behaviour might seem sensible, but as you say, come on the risk register very quickly, and you get far more attention that you want, and then get performance management as an exit package rather than a nice one, thanks for your help kind of thing.
Any more questions at all? I was talking to someone earlier.
So just back to what Mark was saying actually. So during that due diligence phase, I guess, if they're almost acting on behalf of or present some information back to the buyer in a deal, there is a natural tendency, isn't there, I found to cover yourself and list all the risks. So isolating down to one or two or three or a subset is really important. I get that, but still, identifying what those are and the risk excuse the pun that might not highlight something which is really important. Because what's on someone's risk radar for a certain organisation, a certain sector is completely different elsewhere. So, any thoughts, techniques, frameworks for doing that, or is it really just understanding, I guess, almost like the investment thesis for that organisation? How do you go about identifying these are the pertinent things out of the raft of potential risks you've identified?
I'll try and be as quick as I can. I think one thing that's probably worth noting is our industry is maturing as well. So due diligence as an industry hasn't actually been around that long. And people haven't necessarily done it, they've done it quite light touch. And so probably coming out of what we might describe as the checklist phase, and you can probably stand me up and correct me here if I say anything that you think is incorrect, but we're coming out of the checklist phase where our checklist is just a bit longer than yours, and maybe we've got people who are more experienced who can go and do that work. Passed through kind of the pattern matching phase where we've seen hundreds of them, so you can try and dress something up, but we've seen people dress that up that way before, into what I think is really the phase of financial literacy, commercial literacy, and actually describing these risks in commercial terms. And often we'll see something in one business and say, that's a risk, we have to put it on the report, it's got an amber flag against it, and see the same thing in another business and say, that's a risk, it's got an amber flag against it, but it's really important to your business and what you're trying to do with this company and what you're trying to do with this project. And so we're getting better at that as well, I think. That's probably the one thing I would say.
I would definitely say it comes back to something Mark said earlier on of, as you said, what's the investment thesis? Understanding why this matters. It's not just a cybersecurity assessment. It's a synergy and a jigsaw assessment in there. So do you understand what the company wants to get out of this? And then you're able to look at it in that way of, I think this bit, this will just work. This will fit nicely with us. And being able to say what's green as well as what's amber and red, I think is quite useful. There are loads of checklists out there, and there's companies like Crosslake that get them to do a bigger one and then just read the report and work out how to backfill from bits of it, but have a partner for the scary stuff. I think.
This is quite a simplistic model, and again, building on everything that's been said. But when I've been involved in various mergers and acquisitions, I referenced earlier the fact you have you nag the board for the business plan. What's the core objectives? But then, notwithstanding what we've just talked about, what are the synergies from a technology? That's the next thing I start to look at. So therefore, because everybody's looking for cost efficiency and everything else, so synergies is the other one. And then the third one for me is around revenue generation. And it's almost like that's the filter that I would put, notwithstanding the fact that we may identify a number of risks on both sides that need to be addressed. But it helped me start to formulate with my architectural teams the priorities of the approach. Again, it's simple, but it soon grew. But if that's helpful.
Yeah, just to add, I don't think it's rocket science really. It's about, getting your list. Let's say you've got a list of 15 risks, and it could just be as simple as differentiating them in some way, or do the headline first. I guess the point I wanted to make earlier is that you need to just, in the way they communicate it, you need to make sure it's not lost in the bulk of the 15. So it could be, okay, that's a material risk. So the bar I like to use is this a material risk to the value of the acquisition, or getting the deal over the line? So if it meets that bar, then it's something I'm shouting about. If it's not, then really that's something that I should be able to mitigate with the plan. And it could be, okay, there's a risk with the server, we can replace the server. Actually, I just, you could argue, oh, well, I'm covering myself by putting it on a risk, but reality is it's something that we should be able to cover. So really that bar is it a material risk to the deal or the value that we're getting from it? But other than that, it's typical risk management. It's what's the impact, what's the probability, it's your red, amber, green. It's all of it's the same tools that we use to manage other risks. I think just the critical bit is only shout about the really, really top ones.
Cost of delay is quite a useful mechanism I've seen people use quite smartly as well. So cost of delay divided by duration can be quite a nice filtering tool. I wouldn't necessarily rely on it, but it's just something worth looking at maybe.
I've got a question just off the topic actually, so maybe quite a big question. What would you like to be remembered for in your career?
I was going to say, winning the World Cup in 2003, but it wasn't theirs.
I'm going to have a start with that one. So I'm kind of answering with a question to the degree of actually. So someone gave me an exercise to think about how you answer this question. They said, so you're walking down in your office, down the corridor, and just round the corner, your boss is there, and the rest of your team are talking with your boss, and they're talking about you, but they don't know you're there. So you stop and you listen. What do you want them to be saying about you? So it's kind of a different way of answering the question. So for me, it's about, I like to be someone that is valuable, that is helpful, it has helped progress people's career and add value. So that's my answer, and that's a tool to help you think about your answer.
Still thinking.
I did say it's a big question, sorry. Should pre-warned you.
Similar sort of thing, I think, of having been someone that people enjoyed working with and would want to work with again, that I've added some value to their life. That'd be good. Be happy if that was it.
Interesting. Stephen, any thoughts?
I think the way I'd answer that question is probably that the thing I enjoy doing the most is actually useful as well. The thing I enjoy doing the most is helping people connect the dots between things. So I've been a head of sales and a head of technology. Not a lot of people have been on those sides of the business at that level. So that's the thing I enjoy the most in the work that I do, is those combinations of choices and systems and all that sort of stuff. I'd like to think that was useful and that was good at it. So yeah, probably that.
Liz, you've had enough time.
I've had enough time now. I think I'll answer it by telling you a very quick story, which may not be what I'll be remembered for, but I was sat in the very early days of a role. I was asked to go and present, as we all do, to a board session. And one of the the directors, and we're talking 2016, just for to set the scene. And I was after some significant investment for taking digital on a journey in a sector that didn't really sort of embrace technology, digital first approach. And this director looked at me and he said, Liz, why on earth do we need websites? And it was probably the last question I expected. I'd got all my notes about all the possible questions I'd get asked. And I just kept very calm and articulated a story around why I thought it was from a competitive point of view, from a revenue cost efficiency, growth point of view. And I don't think I was making much progress. And the CEO at the time just looked at this person and went, I think that's the worst question I've ever heard. Needless to say, I took him aside afterwards and worked with him, because I thought if I can convince him about my strategy and what we want to try and do, he'll become a massive advocate of what we're trying to do, and that's precisely what happened. So if you like, it was convincing the board at this particular time that we needed to go on a certain journey, and they did. So that's just a real story. I wouldn't say I want to be remembered for that, but that was the story.
It's interesting. I do ask that question quite a lot, and you very rarely, in fact, I think I've ever heard anyone talk about the delivery of a specific project or program. It's more about the feeling of that value creation, that people, that kind of side of it. So yeah, interesting. Okay. Kind of one of the questions that was bolts into what you were saying actually, Liz, is what are some of the techniques that you can apply to get more, or like get a seat at the table when it comes to technology, or get more buy-in from the board?
One of the challenges I've faced, and I'm sure we all have, is going into large corporate organisations where there's big verticals. So separate P&Ls, all off doing their own thing, don't really want group technology type services getting involved because they think they have the answers, which is absolutely fine. And I think that's been a repeated challenge. Some of them have been bigger than others. And one example I'd give you is I was trying to convince the same board, by the way, to innovate and think about innovation. And so I invited all of them to a hackathon, which is old hat now, but at the time it wasn't. And they all went, "What on earth's that?" And I said, "So give me something you need fixing in your organisation, and we'll spend 2 days fixing it." So brought in a load of UX guys, various platform capabilities, and we did that. So I didn't have to prove. What we had to prove is the possibilities of what that could bring. And again, you know, most of them were quite surprised because at the time that wasn't something they were used to, and suddenly they were seeing their problem and how it might be solved. Clearly, they all wanted that in production the next day, and I had to explain that probably wasn't going to be the case. But those are show people, don't tell them, show them. Talk about what you've done, not what you're going to do. I mean, they're all things you'll have heard before, but and just build relationships with people, you know, whatever their challenges might be.
I'll just add to that a little. I think for me, it's all about credibility, and sometimes that credibility is, you know, it's earned, not given. So, you know, sometimes you need to. So for me, it's being the IT guy. So sometimes, you know, I remember that one of our managing directors was in front of they're doing a pitch on a customer site, and I got a phone call to my number saying, "Oh, my password's locked out. I'm doing a presentation. Can you help me?" And I was like, "Okay, well, we've got a team of 70 field IT guys that can probably help," but I didn't say that. Obviously, I was like, "Absolutely, I can help you. No problem. Give me 30 seconds." Picked up the phone to somebody that could help. So, you know, I'm not saying that one instance gave me the credibility to talk about strategy, but it's taking ownership, and actually I did earn a little bit of credibility there because I took ownership of the problem that she had right there. So sometimes we need to do the things that aren't necessarily strategic to get ourselves part of the conversation, build credibility, so when they do have an IT challenge, they know who to come to, and they trust that response. So that's been my experience.
I think building on something I said earlier on of the audience quite often isn't that technical, so don't talk to them technically. We can expect people to understand what we're talking about, or we can try and explain it in a different language. And I think I've had success in that. If you at least try, the audience recognise that you're trying and will engage in the conversation. But if you sit there and talk about DHCP protocols, then we're probably not that interested.
Why ever not?
I'm not that interested.
I guess I'm just going to add to that with, because I started in sales, I was trained as a salesperson. Now you might think, why is that relevant to this audience? Well, sales is a bit of a dirty word to some people, but actually it's all about influence. And the first thing you do in sales is you try and figure out what your customer wants. So I think in terms of framework for garnering influence, speaking to other people's drivers and trying to connect what you can do for them and what you need from them in return is a skill set that can be learned and practiced and improved.
Brilliant. Okay. Any other questions at all? Anyone else? A few more. Add in at all? That could be about anything.
I'll ask one. So often organizations have legacy or niche tech, and it would be good to kind of hear an example or a challenge that you had where a legacy or niche tech became a big issue post being restarted and thought, well, you know, we can deal with it, but it became a real issue, and what was the answer solution to that?
I can make a start on that one. So that's, you've just described my current life. So legacy IT is a problem, right? Technical debt, and that's a big challenge. And again, it doesn't have a really easy answer. But I think, you know, the first challenge is to acknowledge and get people to acknowledge that legacy tech and technical debt is a problem. You know, we often are faced, business colleagues say, well, it's always, you know, the attitude of, well, it's worked for 20 years, why do we need to change it? That, you know, that is an attitude that we still sometimes get. So the first challenge is to get people to acknowledge that it is a challenge, that we need to do something about it. And then look at alternative solutions. You know, the end goal isn't always the next step. So I talked earlier about, you know, we're framing the phrase tier two platform in our organisation, but really what that is we're not ready for the big platform. We need to do something now. Can we do an interim solution, which is maybe 1/10 of the price, but it mitigates that risk and gets us off the legacy platform? So it is a challenge, but there are solutions. So the first step is getting people to acknowledge that there's actually a problem.
Very real problem I dealt with last year and secured investment for this year. I had to do that through prioritisation, and there were lots of things that didn't make it onto that list that needed to. The biggest single thing was storytelling around the reality to those that were interested, the board, etc., around the risks around that and why we had made the prioritised decisions we'd made, and then trying to encourage them to look at longer term consistent investment around maintenance, because what's new today is legacy tomorrow. So how are you building your budgeting cycles and ensure you have something in the kitty for those problems, because they've built up, because everybody goes, well, I'll have left, so it won't be my problem. That's what you hear. So those are some of the approaches I've made in the past.
Yeah, I think it's not uncommon that the technical debt is a half-finished attempt at fixing previous technical debt. So the business case of why is it a business problem? Why is it a commercial problem rather than a technical one? What do we get? If we resolve this, we can deliver faster, we can make changes more safely, we've removed risk, etc. It's that the what's in it for me question from the CFO or the COO who might think, I need these other features over here, and that doesn't sound like it's too big a problem. So visualising why it's a problem, making it real, and trying to explain that in a way that it's painful for them, because it will be somewhere. You just find why they should care about it.
I didn't mention, sorry, within financial services, the regulator is now all over this like a rash. So even if the business doesn't want to deal with it, the regulators are now insisting, and it's driven predominantly by cyber risk, that these things have to be resolved. So there's no hiding places, or certainly in financial services there aren't any hiding places like there used to be. So it's just something else, which could be to your advantage.
Not going to improve on those answers. I've got nothing else to add.
Okay, again, maybe a big question, I'm not sure. What's the best advice anyone has ever given you in your career?
I'll go first because I know what it is. To remember that everyone has a boss except for the customer, and they can fire everyone.
Well, I've heard that before, but that's brilliant.
For me, it's probably never hide anything. If you've got an issue, lean into it. Don't lean away from it and address it. Even if you are just flagging a risk, better do it early, and it's a common thing rather than dealing with pissed off stakeholders because it's now late. I think that applies not just to delivery, but just life in general, really.
I was, it's actually, well, it's sort of unrelated to technology, but from a perspective of, I always undervalued what I could do. And somebody said to me one day, the only person stopping you doing that role is you. And, you know, really encouraging me to strive for the next level, strive for a slightly bigger job, whatever it was I wanted to do. And that definitely made a difference.
I feel like I've been given so many good pieces of advice over the years. I'm kind of
copying out.
I'm going. No, I am going to say one. But there's so many over the years. I've been lucky enough to work with some fantastic people. But the one that kind of sticks with me, that I've found the most value, and I talk about to my team, you know, the most, is that, and it's targeted at people that are going up the chain and changing roles. I think the thing that makes you, let's say you're in a role and you're doing it fantastically well and you get the promotion to the next level, you've got to drop the tasks and the skills that got you there. And I think so many people, we see they take the work with them and they take the skills with them, but you need you might take 20%, but they need to drop that 80%. And I think the real success or failure, I've seen so many people struggle with that challenge.
Yeah.
So I think what are you going to drop is the advice. And with that, you've got to accept that the person that you're dropping it to probably won't be able to do it as well as you. And that's okay, because, you know, if you're willing to accept that sacrifice, then you're opening yourself up to the next 80% on what you can do at the next level. So that for me has been a really solid piece of advice.
Super delegator.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other advice out there at all?
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Say it again, sorry.
Feel the fear and do it anyway. And I think that's got me, I think it's very similar to what you were just saying about that, you know, trying to limit yourself, because you made me a little bit scared. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Right.
Ever since I've been doing that. Worked out well.
Brilliant. Anyone else?
What's keeping you awake at night for 2025?
I actually had that question on here. Thanks.
Cybersecurity. There's, what don't we know? We've looked at a lot of stuff, but there's going to be something. What's that cheeky phrase? There's two types of platform: those that have been hacked and those that don't know. Yeah, it's terrifying, actually.
So my initial answer in my brain was my 2 kids that don't sleep, but the work answer is the same as Andy. So Johnson Controls went through a well-publicised global ransomware attack over a year ago, which was a huge challenge, as you can imagine. So yeah, I kind of totally agree. I never want to do that again. But you know, that's a real threat, and yeah, that keeps me awake.
That would be top of my list, but if you want to build on another one, I was talking about this in the break, because I've done quite a bit in digital. What pieces of work I'm doing at the moment is looking at redesigning digital strategy to meet the needs of the enthusiastic boards around AI, and how you satisfy that enthusiasm appropriately. I wouldn't say it's keeping businesses awake at night, but it's an investment problem that worries people, you know, because of the eagerness to spend lots of money on, I'll use the general term of AI for this example, when actually the realization, the benefits of that may not be quite where they need to be yet. But I would definitely concur on the cyber piece.
I'd echo that. Obviously, the cyber piece that's a genuine, someone's trying to attack you, so that's a threat, like a real life threat. But I think to just build on Liz's point, just knowing that you're not going to get swept away with the LLM, AI, Gen AI wave, and kind of when to get off the carousel. And as advisors, people look to us to give them advice, obviously. We don't know any more than anybody else. And so what you have to do is obviously, about the future, I mean, obviously, you know, we have a body of knowledge and all the rest of it. I don't get myself into trouble with marketing, but the point I'm trying to make is we don't have a crystal ball. And so it's about making sure that you're taking decisions and setting up systems and setting yourself up for both the growth that you want, but also to be resilient in the face of inevitable uncertainty, change, and things that none of us can yet predict.
Brilliant. Go for it.
So, I was, my background is engineering, but I was in defence for a long time before financial services, which was a bit crazy, nuclear submarines and all sorts of stuff. But the company I was working for, Vosper Thornycroft Controls, Portsmouth, was acquired by Rolls-Royce at the start of my career. And no one knew about this until one day, a bunch of people turned up at the offices and they just started putting glasses down places and bringing out the champagne. And we're like, what is going on? No one had actually told us that they'd been acquired. The Rolls-Royce people descended on us and just started trying to ply us with alcohol to get us. So my question is, you know, that's maybe a negative view, but how do you celebrate, you know, mergers and acquisitions? Because when you bring these teams together, I haven't heard a lot about it, about what you do. You know, do you have mini parties and balloons and a red carpet and, you know, cynical glasses of champagne in my face? But anyway, I did drink it all. It was great. I didn't work for the rest of the day. I'm like, I'm done now. I can't work anymore. So I was just interested in how you celebrate, you know, when these teams are coming together, because I think it should be cause for that, right? Really? Probably.
I think it's about communication, even before, you know, once the deal is made public, and sometimes the deal won't be done before it's made public. It's just in the process of, look at Vodafone acquiring Three in the UK. You know, that deal is not done. It's not been approved by the regulator, but it's in the public domain. So again, some examples are meets and greets. So come and meet the team from the acquiring business. They're going to be in the cafe on this date, and then that spins out into different parts of the organisation depending on who might be interested. And that transparency and accessibility of those people. Ultimately, you may want to do some kind of celebration, but I think there's steps to that. Intranet, communication, social media, whatever can be done.
Yeah, leaving gaps, people will fill it with whatever they've made up. So try and avoid leaving the gaps. Everyone will be asking the what's in it for me question from their perspective. So trying to think through some of that. And particularly if you're in the business being acquired, you're likely to feel at risk. That's the fella over there. So it's how do you put people at ease whilst still being open and honest. So I'm not sure there's a one size fits all, but it's definitely communication and probably over communicating.
Just to add my thoughts, I think that's an example of how not to do change management. So yes, the change management is critically important. The first time you know about it definitely shouldn't be when someone places a glass of champagne on your desk. But we do, you know, there's been multiple examples where we've done exactly that, and the balloon, you know, after we've communicated formally and given time to digest the news and what it means to them. Yeah, we've had rebrand days with the balloons and the cakes and the red carpet, all that stuff. But I think that's really important. That's part of the change management, and we talked about the culture shift. You know, it's not right for every business but you know, some businesses that's important to them, and the cake and the coming together is important. So yeah, that actually does form quite a big part of it sometimes. Yeah.
My final question, we've not spoken about AI much today. Has anyone seen any good AI use cases out there? Either within their organisation or externally?
Well, I talked about earlier on, I wouldn't say it's been game changing, but it's enabled people. I was just actually highlighting that you can use it as a tool in a structured and safe way, but use it as a tool to accelerate what you're doing. Now that's definitely getting traction. I think the tooling, the risk of giving Salesforce Einstein a plug, which is far too expensive to do, but it's been super impressive of the call wrap up. We've literally half call handling time by getting that in and getting it right and spending the time with the team to explain how to use it for them and actually what we want the summary to wrap up for them. It could give lots of stuff, but we want to call out these areas and it works. So that's
looking at something like that yourselves, actually. Okay.
it's not quite there yet, and it's still an if as to whether or not we can get it there, but looking at converting legacy code into modern kit. So we've got a lot of clients in mid-market who are on very, very old, like even COBOL and like stuff like that, but maybe old PHP, legacy .NET stuff, and that conversion can be really expensive. And we've seen some really interesting stuff using AI to sort of traverse the existing code, turn that into like overly technical, but like if anyone who's interested, abstract syntax trees, and then using an AI to then turn that into a knowledge graph. And I shouldn't say that we're the only ones doing this. ThoughtWorks are doing this. Others are doing this. But that if that nut can be cracked, that's an incredibly lucrative use of LLMs. Just to put that into context, so the gains that could be something that would take a tech debt project that might be forecast to take 5 to 7 years could be reduced down to 2 or 3. So just think about what the financial saving is there. It's incredible.
The one thing I would say, there are numerous opportunities out there. I was having a conversation with an organisation the other day who didn't really understand the power of something like Copilot, and they had all the Microsoft licenses in the world, but didn't realise what they were sitting on. They also used ServiceNow, and they didn't realise the opportunities. So one of the things I am suggesting, if the question comes up, is look at what you've already got and how you're sweating those assets. And I'm not saying that's directly answering what's the best possible solution, but actually what it does is mitigate the pressure from upstairs to say, what are you doing about AI? Because it's just an underutilisation of capability you're already paying for. So that might be a way forward.
Just to have my view, I think the question around AI is not necessarily where can we use it, but where should we be using it? And I think a lot of times people want to talk about, you know, we can write poems on ChatGPT or the image, the funny images. That's most people's experience of AI, and actually that's what the bit that humans like doing. We like the creative bit. So for me, we should take that really basic fundamental principle and take that to the work. So we should be using AI on the bits that humans can't do. And I've got one really good example. It's not a particularly sexy example, but I used to work for a testing organisation. So they would test the output of chimneys, industrial chimneys, to make sure that the emissions are within the regulation that are allowed by the Environment Agency. Not particularly fun, but they take lots and lots of parameters, and it basically has lots of graphs, and if any of the graphs go above the regulatory line, then they need to shut off the factory and they lose money, in really, really simple terms. And at the moment, that's done by a human going and checking the data every month or every quarter or whatever that is, and based on, you know, regular intervals. And then you can see the line going up. So I think, oh, why is that line for CO2 going up? So we need to go and tweak something in the factory to make that go down. This is my really basic, non-technical explanation. But actually, because they're taking so many different data points, what we found was that there are trends that the human eye can't spot. But I don't know, for example, if this line goes down in conjunction with this line going up, the chemical reaction behind that means that in 3 months' time, you're going to be out of regulation. So it meant that basically the machine model that was built to look at the data and spot trends that the human eye can't spot meant that we could fix problems before they happened and reduce downtime of the factory. So I think that's a really good example. It's a relatively basic example, but it's the bit that a human can't do, but it's an application of the technology that's really going to help. So that's my example.
Yeah, they've been doing it for 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry. Not you know, they've been doing that. Inline control of automation is exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
Been doing it for 30 years. It's just becoming a bit more kind of evident. I mean, I worked in pharmaceuticals from like 2021. They were at 2001. They've been doing it way before that. So like, rather than taking stuff out of like manufacturing plant, then test it, do that in process. Been doing it for decades. And so this technology and the ability it's been there. It's just obviously like powerful nowadays. So
Such an important point.
A little bit of red herring around kind of AI. There's new applications. These sorts of things have existed. And it comes back to the same answer around technology is like, what's the capability you want it to be able to do, as opposed to saying what technology do we have and what we want to do with it. Let's flip the question back to business unit and then we figure out how you can use it.
It's such an important point, and it's kind of where I was going earlier with the the piece about the crystal ball and like, you know, the technology's only one side of the equation. It's the adoption of that technology on the other side, and that's the bit that you can't predict without the rubber hitting the road and people knowing about it and being able to practically actually do the things that they think they want to do. So yeah, that
You look at most business models, retail, like grocery retail, restaurant grocery retail, the business models have not changed for decades and decades. And so the technology's got better and makes it slightly more efficient. It's only when the business model pivots as to whether you're kind of then seeing true application.
Yeah.
That's the question we should be asking ourselves, whether you're going to be a technology professional or a CE leader, is what's that pivot or change in the business model? How can technology then enable that to create value, and whether that then comes through merger and acquisition? Ask that question. That's where you get a seat at the table in the technology or something. You get them to think about it very, very.
Oh, yeah, that's a good place to finish. Yeah, just to finish off, a big round of applause for.